Bedtime stories for kids. Stories for meditation and mindfulness to help children and toddlers feel calm and fall asleep fast. Written by Marissa Nobel. Narrated by Melanie Hench. Dragons. This section of the book is dedicated to stories of dragons and the worlds that they live in. These stories are not scary and are typically great for little boys and girls that are interested in dragons. All of the stories are great bedtime stories to read to your little one. They are also good for independent readers who want to read to themselves as a silent pre-bedtime activity. Dragons are large serpent-like creatures that have been seen in the folk tales of many cultures around the world. In European cultures, dragons are typically winged, horned, and four-legged creatures that breathe fire. In the Eastern cultures like Asia, they are wingless, serpent-like creatures that are very smart. In many cultures, dragons are associated with good fortune and have power over things like rain. Some cultures also have things like sea serpents that are similar to the flying dragons of the West. Max the Brave Dragon. Once upon a time, there existed a land called the Land of Dreams. The land was filled with magical creatures, like dragons. This particular story centers on a story about a dragon named Max. This story tells the tale of how a vegetarian dragon saved his community and friends by being smart and kind. Once upon a time, in the Land of Dreams, there was a dragon named Max. His full name was Maxiliero Dragonite. He was not like the other dragons of that land. He was a giant dragon that was covered in impenetrable scales. Max also had strong wings and could breathe fire. However, what made him unlike most of the dragons of the Land of Dreams was that he liked flowers, birds, kittens, and long naps in the shade of his mountaintop hideaway. He also enjoyed laying on his back and soaking up the sun. Max was also different than the other dragons because while many of the dragons in the Land of Dreams were carnivorous, meaning that they only ate meat, Max was a vegetarian. Max loved eating his vegetables and fruit. Max was also different from the other dragons because while most of the dragons in the land spent their free time playing fighting games, having duels, and hunting, Max did not like those types of activities. He was a dragon that loved peaceful things. So, in his free time, he would play games with the woodland animals of the land. Many of the dragons of the land thought that Max was weird. They didn't like that he was different than they were and only ate fruit and vegetables. They also found it strange that Max didn't eat the woodland animals and would protect them from the other dragons when they went on their hunts. Because Max was considered weird, he didn't spend much time with the usual dragons that lived in the land, and spent most of his time playing with his woodland animal friends that he loved, protected, and cared for. Max was a very compassionate dragon. When the woodland animals first met Max, they also thought he was weird. They were initially scared of Max because they thought he was just like the other dragons. However, once all the deer, bunnies, mice, chipmunks, squirrels, and birds saw that Max didn't want to eat them, they decided to see if he was friendly. Eventually, the woodland animals realized that Max was a nice and kind dragon and decided to become his friend and to love and care for him as well. One of the things that the woodland animals liked about Max was that it was always very warm on his mountain because dragons make a lot of heat, and because Max was nice, he never burned up the ground with his breath. So the food of that area was very good and plentiful. The animals would work together with Max to plant and harvest fruit and vegetables from a very large farm that they worked on together. At night, some of the woodland animals would come into Max's home, which was a cave in the side of his big warm mountain, and sleep. They would have serpent-like all the time, especially during the winter when it was cold in all of the land. During the winter, Max felt especially loved because his animal friends would cuddle right next to him in his big dragon bed because it was cold. He loved snuggling with all his friends every winter. Eventually, he began to love winter the most because his friends would sleep over all winter long to be close to him. One winter in the land of dreams, it was so very cold that many of the hunting dragons were having trouble finding food to hunt for. For weeks and weeks, many of the hunter dragons would go out looking for food, only to come home empty-handed. The dragons began to get very hungry and didn't know what else to do to feed themselves or their families. Some of them wanted to go to the land of men and eat the farmers' food. But in the land of men, there were big bows and arrows that could hurt the dragons, and the men in that land had told the dragons never to come to their lands and steal food. So, the dragons were really desperate to make a solution to find food. Some of the dragons went to the land of men and asked for food, but it was also a very cold winter in the land of men as well, and they also didn't have much food to spare. The nicest men of that land gave the dragon hunters some food to hold them over, but it was not enough to last the entire winter, and the dragons were becoming very scared about being hungry for the rest of the winter. For many of the dragons, they didn't think the winter would ever end, but that was not something that would happen. It would eventually be spring again. Then, one day, one of the meanest dragons in town, a dragon named Deadly, had an idea. His idea was to steal all of Max's friends from him to make a tasty stew that would last the dragons the entire winter long. Deadly the dragon didn't care that these animals were Max's friends and wanted to eat them anyway. At first, the dragons of the town didn't like the idea.
"We should eat Max's animals for food,"
Deadly the dragon said. One of the other dragons in the town named Sindra said, "But those are Max's friends, and if we eat them, he will be sad."
"Max isn't a dragon like us. He sits up in his mountain eating yucky fruits and vegetables all night and day. We should make him learn to be a dragon, like us. And the best way to do that would be to make a delicious woodland stew with those animals."
At first, no one listened to Deadly because they still had so much food left that was given to them from the farmers in the land of men. Unfortunately, the food that the men had given to them eventually ran out, and all the stores and markets in the land of dragons had no food to give away. They even went to the restaurants to see if they had food, and all they were serving was ice cubes and water.
"I can't live on ice cubes and water,"
screamed Deadly the dragon.
"We need to eat some woodland stew before we all starve forever."
"I didn't want to agree with Deadly, but I have nothing to eat either," said Sindra reluctantly. Eventually, all the dragons in the land of dreams agreed with Deadly that the only way to feed themselves was to eat the woodland stew with Max's friends. At first, the dragons were scared and sent up just Deadly to make the request.
"Max, we need your woodland creatures to eat for woodland stew,"
said Deadly the dragon to Max. "You can't eat my friends. Why don't you have a nice tomato stew? Said Max.
Gross! I'm a dragon! I don't eat vegetables!
I'm a dragon, and I eat vegetables and fruit, said Max.
Well, we don't, so give us animals.
They are my friends. You can't have them. Dudley left because Max was a bigger dragon than him, and he didn't want to start a fight with Max that he couldn't win. So he went back to the town and talked to the rest of the dragons. In the town, he told all the dragons how Max refused to feed them anything at all. He lied and said that Max was mean and didn't want to help any of the dragons to have any food. He didn't even tell them about how Max had offered to give them tomato stew. All of the dragons of the town were very upset that Max was being so mean and refused to feed them. They listened to Dudley the dragon and decided to go and fight Max and eat all the woodland creatures that Max was friends with. They waited until it was nighttime and then made their way up the mountain with all their armor and weapons that they had ready to fight Max and take all his friends away to eat in woodland stew. When they arrived at the top of the mountain, Max was waiting for them. He didn't want to fight them, but he had decided that if it was important to protect his friends, that even though he believed in peace, he would definitely help his friends to live their lives happily on the mountain.
Give us the animals!
Yelled the dragons, together as one.
No!
Yelled Max at the top of his lungs. He made sure that they knew he was mad by blowing a column of fire deep into the sky. Then the dragons with the bows and arrows shot their arrows at Max, but because Max has special dragon scales, the arrows were unable to hurt him and bounced right off of him. Max was very mad now. They had tried to hurt him and to hurt his friends.
Why are you doing this? He roared. I said I would give you vegetables and fruits to eat.
Suddenly, a silence fell amongst all the dragons. That was not what Dudley had told them in the meeting. The other dragons began to talk amongst themselves and discuss this proposal.
We certainly don't like fruits and vegetables, but can you make them taste good?
Asked one very hungry dragon.
I can make a stew that is better than your woodland stew with vegetables, and I can make you tasty snacks with fruit. With all the fruits and vegetables that I have in my garden, you will not go hungry this winter.
Dudley said,
But vegetables are gross.
They're how I got so big and strong, and they won't require you to hurt my friends, said Max. Dudley was still upset, but all the other dragons decided to give vegetables and fruits a chance and took Max up on his offer. Dudley even tried the stew and finished 2 big bowls the very first time. The winter eventually ended, and the dragons were able to get more food than they liked to eat, as they did love eating meat, but never did they try to hurt Max or his friends. And some of the dragons liked eating vegetables and fruits so much, they came to visit Max and play with his friends, because every time they visited him, he would make them his special stew. The end. Sweet dreams, little one. The Princess and the Dragon. The Princess and the Dragon is an ancient tale from Greek mythology. It is also known as the story of Perseus and Andromeda. This tale is retold in a way that is more suited to younger children and allows them to identify with this story. Perseus was one of the greatest heroes of Greek mythology. He was the child of Zeus and a mortal named Danae. He was the person who defeated Medusa. He is also a relative of Hercules and is thought to be the creator of Persians. He was a brave man and a good and honorable king. Once, a long time ago, when the gods ruled over the land of Greece, there was a man named Perseus. Perseus was the son of the Greek god Zeus and was given mighty power and intelligence. With that intelligence, he went about the land defeating evil monsters and people. He was a good and brave man and loved the people of his land. One day, Perseus was flying over the land of Africa to return home. In his travels, he went through the land of Ethiopia, which is still a country in Africa to this day. In that land, he met a beautiful queen named Cassiopeia and a strong king named Cepheus. The king and queen were very sad and frustrated because their daughter had been taken away by an evil dragon. Their daughter's name was Andromeda, and she was the most beautiful girl in all the land. Her parents told Perseus how the dragon had come to get her. One day, when Andromeda was walking in the land, she was helping the citizens of the kingdom with their problems. She was feeding the poor and helping the sick. Because Andromeda was so beautiful and was the princess of the kingdom, she didn't want anyone to notice who she was, so she often wore a mask. During that day, the mask happened to fall off of her face as she was bending down to feed someone a meal, and people noticed it was her. News spread all over the land that the kind woman that came to the market every day to help out the poor and the sick was the most beautiful princess in all the land, Andromeda. The next day, when Andromeda went to the market to help the poor and sick, there was a crafty dragon waiting for her. Dragons like beautiful things. They make big nests out of diamonds, rubies, and gold to allow themselves to be around all of the most beautiful things that they can find. And this dragon, having heard that Andromeda was the most beautiful woman in the land, decided that he must have her for his collection. So, the dragon snatched Andromeda and took her to his cave where he had statues, art, and all the jewels and gold that anyone could ever want. Andromeda was smart, and knowing that she could never defeat the dragon on her own, she went with the dragon peacefully so that she would not get hurt. The dragon was very nice to her, but she missed her mom and dad very much. Every day that Andromeda was in the dragon's cave, she would count a small pile of gold, and every day she counted enough gold to be able to help all the people in the kingdom to be healthy and happy. While she was there in the dragon's cave, there was a little window that went out to the sea. She was able to throw messages in bottles down to the ocean, where people would find them and give them to the king and queen. When Perseus heard these things, he was very sad. He wanted to help, but he had never defeated a dragon before. But Perseus was very brave and promised the king and queen that he would help them to defeat the dragon and get their daughter back. He mounted up his flying horse Pegasus and got all his weapons, and went to the mountain that held the cave where the evil dragon was. When Perseus arrived, the dragon was sleeping, and Andromeda was sitting in the middle of the room counting coins, because that was all she could do to pass the time. Perseus ran up to Andromeda and tried to get her to leave, but she didn't want to leave. Andromeda told Perseus that she was worried that if the dragon were to awaken and see her gone, that he would think that someone from the land had come to take her away from him, and that he would do bad things to the town people and destroy the land. Perseus didn't have a plan, so Andromeda told him to come back tomorrow after she had some time to think. The next day came, and Perseus came back, but Andromeda was very sad because she didn't have a good plan to defeat the dragon. She knew from his bragging that he had scales that no sword could go through, so that all of Perseus's weapons would be of no use to help. Perseus asked her if the dragon had any weaknesses, and she said the only thing she knew about the dragon was that he liked to have anything that was beautiful. Just then, Perseus had an idea. In his bag, he had the statue of the head of Medusa that would turn anyone that looked at it into stone. Andromeda told him to wake up the dragon and tell him that he had a statue of the most beautiful woman that ever lived in his bag, and to offer it to the dragon in exchange for all the gold and jewels in his cave. Perseus decided to do just that. He awoke the dragon and told him all about how he had a statue in his bag that was more beautiful than anything the dragon owned. The dragon, in love with beautiful things, did not want to wait and told Perseus he could have anything he wanted if only he showed him the statue. When Perseus took the statue out, he and Andromeda closed their eyes so they would not see it and it wouldn't turn them into stone. The dragon took one look at that statue and froze in place forever. When the dragon was frozen and turned to stone, Perseus and Andromeda grabbed as much of the jewelry and gold as they could hold and took it back to the kingdom to give to the poor. The king and queen were very happy and asked Perseus if he would be the new king and marry Andromeda the princess so that they could rule the kingdom together with their kindness and wisdom. Perseus loved Andromeda because she was smart and had thought of a way to defeat the dragon, so he accepted their offer. The end. Sweet dreams, little one. The Dragons of China. In the world before people, there were dragons, and the place with the most dragons is what we know now as China. In this land, there were hundreds of different kinds of dragons. When the people came, they revered, which means they respected, the dragons and loved to tell stories about them. The history of dragons and all the great wisdom and knowledge that they had became very important to the people who lived in China, as this was one of the only lands that still had dragons when the people began to appear. There is one dragon that was very important to the Chinese people. It was this dragon that helped to form the land that we now know as China. He got a great idea to change the way the land was and to help the people to live in a better way. And this is his story. Before the land of China had people in it, it was populated by dragons alone. And the land was very different, and it would never have been good for people. In this land, there were many hundreds of different dragons, and they spent their days flying around with really having nothing to do. Every dragon really wanted to have a purpose. Back in those days, dragons lived for thousands of years, and the oldest and wisest of the dragons was tired of living in a land where only dragons could be happy. He had traveled to different lands and seen different animals, and one of those animals was called people. And they seemed to enjoy seeing dragons, even if some of them would get very afraid. The wisest dragon began to make an idea. He was tired of being bored and having no purpose in his life, and thought that maybe if he changed the land to be better suited for the people and the animals that they liked, that they would move to China and learn all that they could from the dragons. He realized that serving people would help them to feel useful, and feeling useful is one of the greatest purposes for a human, or a dragon. He told the many other dragons of the land his plan to serve the people by creating them the land of China. The other dragons were unsure of this plan at first, but believed that since he was the oldest and smartest dragon and had flown all over the world, that they should listen to him and try his plan. His plan was to make the land to be better for both humans and dragons, and that by doing so, the people and the animals would come and worship the dragons and learn from them and hear all their stories. The dragons liked this plan because they had a lot of knowledge from their thousands of years of life on the planet, and no one but other dragons who were nearly as old as they were to tell their stories to. Each dragon was given the task to bring something to the new land. One large red dragon decided to bring happiness and fun to the land. This would allow the people and animals to come together and throw parties for the dragons and to have lots of fun. A small green dragon with dark green spikes decided to create the trees and plants. A white, thin, and long dragon created air for the people and animals to breathe. A fat blue dragon created lakes, streams, and oceans for the people to swim in, fish in, and drink. Some dragons created stars for the people to look at. Another dragon created the sun, while another dragon, realizing that the people might want to sleep at some point, decided to create the moon. Another created lights, so that in the darkness of night, the people wouldn't be scared. Another created joy, so that the people would be happy and have good times. After they created all of these things, the people still hadn't come to the land. So, the wisest dragon of all decided to create the animals and the people himself. The first creature that he made was black and white and ate only plants, and he decided to call it a panda. All of the dragons liked the panda, so he decided to make another animal. This one was also black and white, and he called it a crane. The dragons also liked this animal, so he continued making new animals with all of the colors of the rainbow. After making all these animals, he realized that he was missing the people that he wanted to talk to and teach all his wisdom to, so he went to make the human. He began with making them stand up straight with 2 arms and 2 legs. This would help them to be able to carry things because he didn't think that they should fly around like the dragons, because dragons were very fast in the sky, and they didn't want the humans to get hurt. He then gave them eyes to see, so they could look at all the beautiful things the dragons had created for them. He also gave them ears, so they could hear all the beautiful sounds that the animals made, and to hear the dragons tell them things to make their lives better. He made 2 humans, 1 man and 1 woman, so they could start a family and make other humans themselves. He figured it would be too hard to teach a lot of humans at the same time, and the dragons could each teach the 2 human things, and then those humans could teach their children, and their children could teach other children the knowledge that the dragons gave them. Eventually, there were many humans in the land, and the dragons asked them what they should call the land that they made for them. The humans in the land said they would like to call it China. The dragons liked that name as well, and for many thousands of years, the dragons and the humans lived together in peace and taught each other things and celebrated the wisdom and power of the dragons in big, beautiful festivals with all kinds of art and music made by humans. The dragons loved the humans because they had created art and music, and the humans loved the dragons because they had created them. The end. Sweet dreams, little one. The Reluctant Dragon. This story tells the tale of a dragon that is misunderstood by the many people in a town. It tells a great story about how, despite our differences, goodness can be found in anyone, as long as you try to have some understanding. With the open-mindedness of a child, a girl is able to save the dragon from a terrible fate, with fast thinking and a love of finding commonalities within all of the creatures of the world in which she lives. A long time ago, there was a shepherd that was walking through the forest near his home. In the forest, he saw something that scared him so much that he ran home crying. The man ran all through the forest back to his home to tell his wife and daughter what he had seen that had frightened him so much.
"I saw something in the forest,"
he yelled at the top of his lungs. When he calmed down, he began to describe the terrible beast he saw.
"It was as big as 4 horses, with long sharp claws and a long pointy tail. It had shiny blue scales all over its body."
His daughter, who was very smart and had read many books about all types of things, knew exactly what he had seen. "Dad, it must have been a dragon, but I didn't think there were dragons around these parts anymore." Hearing this, both the man and his wife were scared, but the daughter wasn't very scared at all. She had thought her dad must be mistaken, as no one had seen a dragon in a very long time. Besides, she thought to herself, if my dad was able to get away from the dragon, it might not be a mean and ferocious dragon, and might just be a good dragon in need of a friend. So, the very next day, when she had finished her chores, she set out to go find the dragon in the forest. It took her all morning long, but she took some books with her about dragons and went to look for caves and mountains in the forest. She found a cave in the side of a large hill in the middle of the forest and suspected that a friendly dragon would probably live in a hillside cave rather than the cave of a big mountain. When she got up to the cave, she knocked and said, "Hello, is there a dragon in here? My name is Saray, and I've come looking for a friend." There was a dragon in that cave, and it was friendly. The dragon was very tall as a house, and wide. It had the most beautiful shiny blue scales all over its body. The dragon had big purple eyes and little tiny wings that were mostly for decoration, as they wouldn't help him fly anywhere at all. "Hi, Saray," the dragon said in a meek little voice. "It's been so long since I've had a friend. Please come in. I'll make you some dragon tea, and I baked some cookies just yesterday. Would you like to have some cookies and tea with me?" "Why, yes, I would, Mr. Dragon," she said. "You can call me Brett," said the dragon. "It's short for Brettadonizard." Brett the dragon and Saray sat and ate cookies and drank tea together all afternoon. The dragon told the little girl all about the days when he was a young dragon, when there were knights and princesses and many, many evil dragons. The dragon told the little girl all about the days when he was a young dragon, when there were knights and princesses and many bad and evil dragons that had captured princesses and fought the knights for their gold. Brett told Saray that he had never wanted to be an evil dragon and enjoyed living in the forest and talking to the animals, because he had lived long enough to learn all the languages of the forest animals, although he said his squirrel was still not that great, and he had trouble understanding them because squirrels spoke so fast. Saray came to visit the dragon every day that she wasn't too busy, but eventually, her parents started to worry because of the things they read about dragons in books. Saray told her parents that this dragon was different than the other dragons, but her parents, being adults, were too set in their ways and didn't want to try and see the good in another being. Eventually, her father told all the men and women in the village about the dragon and said that they must go to slay the dragon and drive him out of the forest near the town before he flew in and burnt the village to the ground. Saray told them that the dragon was but a small dragon and not at all ferocious and mean like the ones in the stories. She tried to explain about the dragon tea and the most delicious cookies that she had ever eaten, but no one would listen to her. They were set in their ways and wanted to go to defeat the dragon. Saray told her parents to come to the dragon's cave to meet him so that they could see that he was a nice dragon and would never hurt anyone in the village. Her parents didn't want to hear it, but then Saray reminded them that they had told her when she was very young to try and understand people even if they are different than she was. At first, they said that this was a different situation since it was a dragon and not a person, but then they realized that they should give everyone, including dragons, a fair chance at being a friend. Just because he was different than they were didn't mean that he wasn't a good and honest being. When her parents arrived at the cave, they were scared, but then the dragon came out with freshly baked dragon bread cookies. Dragon bread cookies are almost exactly like gingerbread cookies, except they have a special dragon spice that makes them taste just 1,000,000 times greater than a regular cookie. Saray's parents tried the cookies and loved them, and then they talked to the dragon, who told them all about how he could speak all the languages of the animals and stories of the world long ago. After having met the dragon themselves, they knew that he was a good being and would not hurt the villagers or burn the village with a ferocious fire breath. Unfortunately, the villagers were still planning on fighting the dragon because Saray's father had told them of how ferocious the dragon looked in the dark of the night. So, they created a plan to deal with the villagers without having to fight and cause harm to anyone. Saray and her parents told the dragon to plan out a party and make all the most delicious treats that he knew how to make. That they would put out decorations and make sure that there were musical instruments to play so that everyone could have a big party when the town showed up the next afternoon. The very next day, with all the preparations in place for the party, Brett the dragon, Saray, and her parents waited for the townsfolk to show up. It was late afternoon when the town people showed up, carrying all sorts of weapons with them to fight the dragon. However, when they got to the cave, they were shocked. It looked like a great big party was about to start. Just then, Brett and Saray came out of the cave, carrying a big bowl filled with dragon chips and dragon cookies. Before the villagers could start to fight the dragon decided to greet them. "We've been waiting for you, for the party to start," said Brett the dragon. "I told you the dragon was a nice dragon," said Saray, giggling at the confused faces everyone from the village was making. Then Saray's parents came out from the cave, holding some of the many different dishes of food that the dragon had prepared for the party. Saray's dad knew how to play the guitar and started to play a song, and some of the musicians from the town came and joined him to play music. Eventually, everyone in the town was having a good time at the party and getting to know the dragon. Many of them apologized for assuming the worst about the dragon without trying to learn about who he was first. The dragon, being very wise and old, was very understanding. He knew that it is sometimes very hard to understand new people, and that often it can be hard to give people the benefit of the doubt, that it can be very hard to assume that people are nice before listening to rumors. The townspeople were very happy to have met Brett because he knew all the languages of the animals and could help them with many troublesome problems that they were having. He said he would try his best to help them explain to the squirrels that houses are for humans to live in, but that his squirrel was not very good, and he always had trouble understanding them. The humans laughed because they realized that he was just the same as them, that he had difficulties with some things, just like they did. Everyone was very happy they had met the dragon, and eventually, the dragon had lots of visitors to the cave and, eventually, opened up his own bakery in the town, full of all the special dragon treats that no one else knew how to make. The end. Sweet dreams, little one. The Dragon That Couldn't Fly. This story tells the tale of a little dragon that was born without wings. It helps children to learn that just because someone is disabled or different, that they are not too different for a friend. It is a good and short story, perfect for little ones, and is a perfect story to start a meditation about before bedtime. It is also great for little ones who feel different from their peers, because it allows them to see that just because they are different, it doesn't make them any less loved. Once upon a time, there was a land filled with dragons. In this land, all the dragons could fly. The dragons would fly themselves from every place in the land. In this land, there was a mother dragon and a father dragon, and they wanted a baby dragon to complete their family. Eventually, the mother dragon laid a dragon egg and watched over it, waiting for it to hatch so that she would finally be a mother dragon to a new baby dragon. They waited many months for the egg to hatch and were very hopeful. While they waited, they prepared a bedroom for their new baby dragon with a crib, books, stuffed animals, and a rocking chair that they planned to sit in at night so they could read bedtime stories to the new baby dragon. One day, the egg hatched, and out popped a new baby dragon. The new baby dragon was beautiful. He had big green eyes and purple and yellow scales. His mother had purple scales, and his father had yellow scales, and he was a mix of them both. The parents were very happy to have such a beautiful baby, but then they noticed that something was wrong. Their baby dragon had been born without wings. They loved him still and named him Corbin. At first, the dragon parents were very sad. They had never met a dragon without wings before and didn't know what to do. Since they didn't know what to do, they decided to take their baby Corbin to the dragon doctor. They knew that the dragon doctor would know because doctors are very smart and have studied many things. When they went to the dragon doctor, the doctor looked at the baby and gave him a checkup to see if he was healthy. The dragon doctor checked his eyes, ears, nose, and mouth, and made sure that he was healthy and happy. Then the dragon doctor said, "Your baby is very healthy and just doesn't have wings. Sometimes baby dragons are born without wings, and they just have to learn how to walk and run. He will never be able to fly as you or I can, but he will be able to do many things." This made the dragon parents sad. They wanted their baby to be able to fly, like they had been able to do. They knew that all the best dragon games involved flying, like flyball and flappy wings. However, they loved their baby Corbin, and said they would teach him how to walk and run and learn new games to play with the other dragon children. At first, it was hard to teach their son how to walk and run. Usually, dragons figured that out after they learned how to fly. So they had to teach baby Corbin how to walk and run without any help from wings. It was hard for them to do, so they got the help of a special kind of doctor to teach their son how to walk and fly without wings. Corbin eventually learned to walk and run and was very happy. He didn't even miss not having wings because his parents told him that he was special and loved every day. When Corbin got bigger, he had to go to school. There was a special school for dragons that didn't have wings. At the special school, he learned all the same things that other dragon kids learn, but he also learned how to do things without using wings. It was very hard for Corbin to learn these things because the world around him was not made for wingless dragons. One day, Corbin the dragon was playing in the park, and some big kid dragons started making fun of him because he couldn't fly. Corbin was very sad and ran home to cry to his mother. When he got home, his mother gave him a hug. "Mama, they said I was weird because I can't fly, and they didn't want to play with me." "Corbin, honey, don't worry about those dragons. They are mean in their heart and don't realize just how special you are. Remember that you can run faster than any dragon I've ever met. And remember, you are kind and generous, and people will want to be your friend and play with you because of who you are, not what you can do." Corbin felt happy knowing that he was the best at running, and he went back to the park to play. He realized that even if the other dragons didn't like him because he didn't have wings, he had many friends that liked him because he was kind and generous, and they didn't care that he didn't have wings. One day, there was a big fog over Dragonland, and because of the fog, it was really hard for anyone to see when they were flying. Because of this, everyone had to walk around the town. All the kids at the park were bored because they couldn't play Flappy Wings or Fly Ball. They didn't know what to do because they didn't know any games that didn't involve flying. Corbin decided to go up to the other dragons and tell them how to play some fun games that he knew, games he had made up with his parents. They played a game called hopscotch, and the dragon big kids liked it. Then they played a game called baseball, which was just like flyball, except you had to play it on the ground. The dragons really liked this game, and Corbin was the best at it because he could run so very fast. All of the dragons thought Corbin was really fun to play with and wished they had given him a chance to play with them before. They didn't realize that just because someone was different, that they could also be fun. From that day on, Corbin was never sad again because he had lots of friends that were willing to play games with him on the ground. They saw that he was kind and generous, and everyone said he was the fastest runner in town. The end. Sweet dreams, little one.